Welcome in to another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wasserman here with our preseason top 25 teams in college football entering the 2025 season. Dalton, we've seen the coaches poll came out already. Some other big media analysts dropped their top 25s. Now we're going to drop our top 25 heading into 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly not to start any arguments here, right? We're not ones to do that.
No.
But look, anytime you get a preseason top 25, it's always speculation. It's about who's got the most talent, who's in the best situation to try to win a national title. And obviously, look, am I always the biggest fan of just placing teams wherever, even though we haven't seen them on the field yet? Not necessarily, but you do want to get a good idea of where these teams stand right now, especially heading into a massive week 1 and even week 0 of college football.
See, I have the take, and there's people on Twitter saying this yesterday too, and I agree with them. I think preseason polls are valuable. I think the only problem with them is when you let that preseason bias that you have skew what you think of a team mid-season, and all of a sudden in the midway point of the season, you're not ranking off resumes, you're just ranking off, oh, okay, well, I had this team number 1 and all that. That's why I think they're still a really good team. So I think at the midway point of the season, around October or so, rank resumes, not how good you thought they were preseason, but preseason polls I think are valuable. It's always cool seeing like the big early, like Texas, Ohio State, instead of being unranked versus unranked, you got maybe number 1 versus number 2, right? So I think it helps out the fans to kind of see who the best teams are. So I think preseason polls are valuable just to see who the top teams are entering the year. But I agree with you. Once you're at the midway point of the season, like you should be ranking off resumes, not anything else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You have to, at some point, you have to transition to that, right? As opposed to, well, this team was ranked top 10 preseason. Well, they hadn't played a game yet when they were ranked that high, right? So, and the fun part for me is looking back on it and going, okay, some of these 25 teams are going to drop out very soon, or at least by the end of the year. And then as we saw last year with teams like Indiana, like SMU, like Arizona State, like BYU, we're going to see, okay, some of these teams are going to land in the top 20 or maybe even the top 12 at the end of it all.
Before we get into the show, we got to remind you guys right now, the PFF Plus sale is ending today. Today is the final day. You can get PFF Plus for 33% off for $40 off a year right now. So get it right now to get the best fantasy tools on the planet, the best betting tools on the planet as well, and of course data and insights on every single team and player in college football and the NFL. The same data that all 32 NFL teams use and the same data that all 136 FBS teams use too are all available to you guys with a PFF Plus subscription. Again, the link is in the description below, or go to subscribe.pff.com and use the code EARLYBIRD to get PFF Plus for annual deal, $40 off, 33% off. Again, today is the final day for that sale, so take advantage of it right now. Dalton, before we dive into our top 25 teams, a team that is very high up in our top 25 had some major news today. Archie Manning, the grandfather, of course, of Arch Manning, came out and said Arch Manning will not be declaring for the 2026 NFL Draft. He will be staying at Texas. Now, of course, some things maybe can change if Arch wins a Heisman or if Texas wins a national title. Maybe plans change, or actually depending on who gets the number 1 overall pick could be a factor too. But we kind of had the feeling he would stay for 2 years at Texas to be the starting quarterback. But with his grandpa coming out today and saying, no, he is staying for 2 years at Texas, massive news for the Longhorns.
Yeah, let's start first with Arch and next year's draft, right? Because everybody's been hyped. Okay, is it going to be 2026, or is he going to be added to this potentially elite 2027 class so we could have and even add more hype to that? But I think we get to a point now where all those things you just mentioned, if he does have some sort of Joe Burrow-esque year and a clean sweep, Heisman, national title, and there's really nothing left to accomplish, then I still think maybe the door is cracked
open. And the Saints have the first pick,
if he's very clearly going to be the number 1 pick, and then you talk about what if it's the Saints, what if it's the New York Giants, what if it's a team that already has that Manning legacy. I don't think the Colts I don't think they're bad enough to work their way in that conversation, but you never know. There's also a whole NFL season to go. But I think as far as there's so many angles to take on this, right? I think first, as far as the draft goes, if Arch Manning, if we're almost guaranteeing him to be in the 2027 class, what a ridiculous year we're going to have that season with all the receivers we've talked about, Leonard Moore, the cornerbacks, right?
The edge rushers,
Simmons and Stewart, from South Carolina and Texas.
DJ Lagway competing for
DJ
QB1.
Lagway from Florida, Dylan Raiola from Nebraska, the quarterbacks. I mean, just that quarterback class with those three guys, first of all, on top of anybody else that might get added in that span. You're talking about a potentially legendary 2027 class that could see more than likely, apparently, Arch Manning as a part of it. That's the first thing that a lot of NFL people are going to look at is that class right there.
That is a legendary 2027 class. Now, for college football, some massive implications, too, because we think Arch Manning is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I think he's right now the betting favorite to win the Heisman Trophy this year. So if he returns for 2026 and he's as good as we think he can be in 2025, Texas is absolutely still a national title favorite, not only this year, but the following year, too. And Don, I was saying this pre-show, this sets up beautifully for Steve Sarkisian, because when Arch Manning committed to Texas, they already had Quinn Ewers, right, who was ended up being a solid quarterback in college, pretty good quarterback in college, but you allowed Arch to sit for 2 years. Now, with Arch apparently staying for 2 more years at Texas, Texas right now has the number 1 quarterback in the 2026 high school class, and Dia Bell committed to him. He's actually the son of former NBA, really good defensive player Raja Bell, actually. But Dia Bell, the number 1 quarterback in 2026. Now that Arch is staying for 2026, Dia Bell can sit for a year behind Arch Manning and not have the pressure of being the starting quarterback as a true freshman. So Sark is just really going at this beautifully, where you have a guy who's a really highly rated recruit, like Arch Manning was the number 1 quarterback out of high school, but he could sit for 2 years behind Quinn Ewers. Now with Dia Bell coming in, the number 1 quarterback out of high school, he could sit behind Arch Manning too, and Quinn Ewers was the number 1 quarterback coming out of high school too. So Steve Sarkisian is just doing an amazing job just recruiting at quarterback and recruiting everywhere, honestly. But the plan he has, where these guys don't come in, even though they're the number 1 quarterback out of high school, they don't come in with the pressure of starting as true freshmen like Bryce Underwood or other guys like Dylan Raiola too. They don't have that kind of pressure on them. I just love the way he's building this program
It's the same type of machine that Ryan Day has built at Ohio State, right? When you look at, other than obviously he won a national title last year with a transfer quarterback in Will Howard, but that's not really the way that he generally prefers to operate. And Steve Sarkisian's doing the same thing. Look, he probably tells these guys, we get as much offensive talent as any team in the country. He's one of the best play callers in the country. Now they've built one of the best defenses in the country. So you're right. Not only is Texas equipped to make a national title run this season, but for multiple seasons and for an indefinite amount of time, really. And I think about, not just for this season and the draft and everything that's going to go into 2026, the early parts of it, but then you look ahead at the 2026 season. Look at all the quarterbacks. And one of the themes of this year is that we have a lot of teams with a lot of inexperienced quarterbacks, right? Alabama, Ohio State, Texas with Arch with just 2 career starts. But you suddenly look at the 2026 season, getting a year ahead of ourselves here, and go, look at all the guys that could be fine. Bryce Underwood at Michigan, right? You talk
Julian Sayin at Ohio State.
Julian Sayin could be going into year 2 next year at Ohio State. You're going to get this group really of second-year starters in the 2026 season, assuming Arch. And then you talk about, DJ Lagway at Florida. We'll see the progress that they make this year. And if he's going in really to year 3 in 2026, we're going to get some shootouts with these quarterbacks over the next couple seasons. This year, there's a weird mix of experience, say guys like Drew Aller and Garrett Nussmeier and Cade Klubnik, and then a lot of teams with young guys who we're just not sure where it's going to go yet. But come this time next year when we're previewing 2026 and Manning is still around, assuming he's still around, you've got all those other guys we just mentioned, it's going to get ridiculous at the quarterback position really quick.
It's going to be really interesting because you mentioned there's some massive programs with brand new stars, like Ty Simpson could stick around for another year too at Alabama. He's going in his first year this year. Julian Sayin has to stick around for 2 years at Ohio State. Now, of course, he's still in a battle with Lincoln Keenholz right now for the starting quarterback job, but we think Sayin's the favorite for right now. CJ Carr at Notre Dame could be going into year 2 as a starter there too. Dante Moore could stay for another year too.
And let's just say, Dante Moore, you just mentioned, I was just going to get there too. There are guys that people are just assuming are coming out in 2026 that don't necessarily have to. Who's to say Lenore Sellers doesn't come back for another year for South Carolina? Who's to say that I just had another one in my Sam Levitt doesn't come back for another year at Arizona State and everything going on there with Kenny Dillingham and them? So, I mean, look, people are always trying to make these wild draft assumptions a year ahead of time, and obviously Arch one way or the other is one of them, but all of a sudden you're talking about a group of young quarterbacks in college football that has the near future of the sport in really good hands.
It's such a massive news for Texas today. Obviously, his grandpa coming out and saying that he will not be declaring next year. He will be staying in school for 2 more years at Texas. We always thought that would happen because Peyton Manning and Eli Manning stayed in school for 4 years, even though both of them likely could have been top picks in the year before if they declared. They were both the number 1 overall pick in their draft. When they did declare, Arch Manning seems to be following that path too. We kind of had a feeling that was the plan for the Mannings, but now they come out outright and said, hey, this is the plan now.
And we're seeing more and more that one-year college starters have been struggling in the NFL, right. And teams are more and more wary. There's the old Bill Parcells rule that he wanted his college quarterbacks to have 30 starts in college football before he started thinking about them as NFL prospects, right? So we've seen, a recent one I think about is Mitch Trubisky, who only started 1 year at North Carolina. We've seen these guys Anthony Richardson 1 year at Florida, and we see he's battling for his job right now. You just see that lack of experience and lack of game reps. I think about Trey Lance as well, right? Even though he went 3rd overall, only 1 year really starting at North Dakota State. So that experience and just getting live reps against defenses and athletes in college football that are better than ever, it's so valuable, right? Just to have that feel and have that feel against those opponents.
Imagine if Arch wins the Heisman and a Natty and returns for another year. He'd be the biggest megastar in college football maybe we've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, and gunning at that point as the clear favorite, most likely coming back for a national title next season, although it's going to be a loaded field.
According to On3's NIL valuations right now, he's worth $6.8 million, which is by far number 1 of any collegiate athlete. The next one is at $4.3 million. So he's worth $2.5 million more than anyone else right now. Imagine if he has a great year and comes back to school for another year. He could be one of the most valuable athletes we've ever seen in college
And that's
sports.
A huge argument when it comes to especially the quarterbacks and what they're making at the college level for staying another year, because you're not financially incentivized now to go in the NFL. 6.5. Let's say he's worth $6.5 million. Isn't that about what Cam Ward and those guys at the top are getting right on the NFL rookie scale? So there's really no financial incentive to start your NFL career. The only thing is, you come back another year, there's always an injury risk, but he's not hurting for money. That's for darn sure. And even when you think about some of these other guys, when there was an argument about, say, Carson Beck earlier, should he come out in the draft? And then he just got hurt, but he's still getting probably, what are we guessing, $3 to $4 million from Miami this year, if not more. So, I mean, there is an incentive now, even more than ever, for guys to stay in school because they're going to make the money regardless.
And even if there wasn't NIL, he is a Manning. They're not hurting for money either.
That's true.
So he's like, it's not like money, I think, is really a factor in this decision making for Arch Manning. But it's huge news for Texas. Again, we kind of expected this for Texas, but massive news for them nonetheless. All right, let's finally dive into this top 25 right now. Starting off with teams number 21 through 25. I want to remind you guys, this is actually my list that I made. So if Dalton has anything he wants to change about this, Dalton, I want you to tell me.
I disagree with every bit.
Every
last bit.
Good. All right, let's get through number 21 through 25 right now, my top 25. At number 25, the Auburn Tigers. Even though they had a losing season last year, I like their chances a lot to be much better in 2025. At number 24, the guy on the left right there, maybe him and Arch Manning having an argument for the most hyped quarterback recruit of all time, Bryce Underwood at Michigan, will be starting week 1 probably as a true freshman. He's leading Michigan number 24. Ole Miss at number 23. Great team last year. Just missed out in the playoff. Have to replace a lot of talent, but of course Ole Miss has done a really good job in the last couple years under Lane Kiffin. Number 22 is Tennessee. A lot of questions offensively with the Volunteers. Made the college football playoff last year with Nico Iamaleava gone, Dylan Sampson gone, some offensive linemen and some receivers gone too. But their defense should still be really, really good in 2025. And then at number 21, on a team that it feels like will always be in this kind of range is Kansas State. They're always like number 20 through 23 in the preseason AP poll, and they're always kind of finishing around that mark too with always 8 or 9 wins in the season. Kansas State should once again be a very solid team in the Big 12.
Yeah, I think this group, we obviously know who K-State's quarterback is, and we talk about Avery Johnson a lot, and they're going to have the first game of the college season. It's going to be a lot of fun. But these next 4 teams, and you look at just the quarterback, different types of quarterback questions that you have about them. Tennessee with the Nico Iamaleava saga, and now they're going, we think, to Joey Aguilar, even though I think the competition's still a bit open. Ole Miss with Austin Simmons as a first-year starter. Michigan, we are assuming for now Bryce Underwood or maybe Mikey Keene for a bit, but it's eventually going to be Underwood's team. And then Auburn with Jackson Arnold coming in from Oklahoma. It's really the most interesting one, right? Because you're talking about a team that was 5-7 last year. Arnold transfers in. Auburn does have a boatload of talent, right? Even some other transfers like Xavier Chaplin and Eric Singleton. They've got Keldrick Falk, the big defensive end. A lot of people think is going first round. But to me, I see some teams here early on, especially Kansas State and Auburn, Boy, their first games of the season, K-State in Ireland against Iowa State, massive conference game, and then Auburn-Baylor. I'll be honest with you, we were going through earlier our list of games that we're going to preview, and Auburn-Baylor is going to be one of them. That's the one more than any other. I have no idea who's winning that game.
Yep.
That's going to be a wild football game, one of the best games of week one. What should be a much improved Auburn team against a Baylor team that a lot of people think is a dark horse in the Big 12.
Baylor was a team I considered. They'd probably be a top 30 to 35 team in the country if we extended this list. So Baylor, I like them a lot too. And yeah, we are going to preview that game. We're going to, of course, preview the Kansas State-Iowa State game in Ireland in a couple of weeks too. That's a massive, massive week 0 game. I know it's literally the first game of the college football season, but that game could have huge implications on the Big 12 race later on this year. Iowa State did not make my top 25, but they, again, like Baylor, would have been somewhere in that 26 through 35 range, I would say. And then, listen, I know the Auburn one's going to be the one that everyone's talking about right now because Auburn's like, okay, listen, they've had 4 straight losing seasons, 5-7 last year. They didn't make a bowl game last year. Why is it different this year? I'll tell you right now, I think they improved at quarterback. I think Jackson Arnold was held back at Oklahoma last year as a former 5-star recruit. They had a horrendous supporting cast at Oklahoma last year, whether it be the beat-up receiving corps or the beat-up offensive line. It was terrible all the way around for the Oklahoma offense. And yes, Jackson Arnold wasn't great last year, but we've seen time and time again talented quarterbacks fail when their supporting casts aren't very good. Oklahoma's was a disaster last year. So I think at Auburn, who in my opinion has a top 10 offensive line in the country and a top 3, I believe, receiving corps in the country with 2 of my top 6 overall receivers in the country, and Cam Coleman coming back for his sophomore year, who should be a breakout star as a sophomore, and then Eric Singleton Jr., who I think is a top 5 receiver in the country, transferring in from Georgia Tech. The supporting cast there is much better. The defense has a very intriguing and young secondary with some really good players back there, like Jay Crawford back there as a sophomore, and the defensive line, Keldrick Falk could be a top 10 to 15 pick at edge rusher too. I like Auburn's chances this year to maybe not make the playoff, but they should certainly be a tough out in the SEC and should definitely have a winning season next year.
It could be a lot of fun. I mean, you look at the early part of their schedule. You've got the Baylor game week 1 is massive. Their first SEC game, because of course it is at Oklahoma, which is just fantastic. Their next game after that is at A&M, and then they get Georgia after a week off. You're going to find out with Auburn real quick early in the season. If they get through the first half of this schedule, they're cruising a lot smoother through the second half, especially if they prove they can beat at least most of those teams, even if they start 5-1 or so. So I think this Auburn team, you're right, they have a lot of talent. Sometimes in these preseason polls, you got to call your shots of teams with talent who could be better. I don't hate it at all. Arnold is absolutely the X factor there. I can't wait for week 1, even just that first game at Baylor.
And the other one I want to talk about, because I've seen this school be ranked in the top 15 of some rankings, and I have them at number 24, is Michigan. I understand, listen, the biggest problem with Michigan last year was they had nothing at quarterback. And I understand they brought in Bryce Underwood, who, like I said before, is the highest rated quarterback recruit in high school football history. No high school quarterback has ever entered college with the rating that Bryce Underwood has coming out of high school. So I get that. But you got to remember, he's a true freshman. And the supporting cast at Michigan is still not very good right now. I think the offensive line and the receiving corps still around the same as it was last year. If not, maybe the receiving corps even a little worse with Colston Loveland leaving for the NFL too. So that does worry me. Now, of course, an excellent quarterback can elevate that supporting cast, but he's a true freshman. And that supporting cast right there, like Jackson Arnold a little bit at Oklahoma, like I'm still a little worried about the supporting cast from Michigan. So still have a great defense, still really good defensive line, even with Josiah Stewart and Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant leaving. And the secondary should be pretty good too, even with Will Johnson leaving. But I just think Michigan is more of a top 25 team rather than a true playoff contender.
Same thing. Great out-of-conference game, week 2 at Oklahoma. Bryce Underwood versus Brent Venables and a loaded Oklahoma defense. That's going to be a lot of fun. That's what I can't wait for. Some of these early season non-conference matchups where we're going to find out a lot about these teams. But you're right, Michigan, the supporting cast offensively would still concern me. They're still going to try to run the ball with Justice Haynes and those guys in the backfield, but it might take some adjusting. They need somebody, especially outside at receiver, to step up for me.
All right, before we move on, anything in that top 21 through 25 that you would change, that you think one team should be way higher or way lower or not even in the top 25 at all? What do you think of that 21 through 25?
No, this is about the range. We can maybe get into a couple teams later on that are out that you could put in, but as far as I don't think there's anything egregious here. Okay. I like about where all of these teams, like you mentioned, it feels like Kansas State's at number 21 every year, right? Yeah. And then these other teams, look, good, talented SEC teams for the most part that are going to win anywhere from 7 to 9 games. They're going to be good. It's just a matter of if they can compete at the top.
So Kansas State is actually in the last 2 years, they were number 18 in 2024, number 16 in 2023, but they've ended around that range too. So it's just they're always like a top.
Slightly down on them.
Yeah, exactly.
All the way down to 21. Okay. I mean, just shows you the consistency of that program.
Yeah.
Too.
Very good. All right, let's get through number 11 through 20 now and talk about a lot of these schools in that range. So at number 20, we've got Utah. At number 19, SMU. 18, Louisville. 17, Texas Tech. 16, Arizona State. 15, South Carolina. 14, Illinois. 13, Texas A&M. 12, Indiana. And number 11, Miami. Anything sticks out, Dalton, in that 20 through 11 range?
So I think with K-State at 21, and then when you're looking at Utah 20, Texas Tech 17, and Arizona State 16, I think this shows you once again that the Big 12 is as wide open as ever, right? And two of these teams, when you're talking about Texas Tech and Utah, two more teams that we're betting on the talent level. Texas Tech brought in a boatload of talent, especially when you look at their defensive line and even a running back with Quentin Joyner and everything that they've brought in, spending all the money that they have to build this roster. Texas Tech is trying to be a factor in this Big 12 race. And then I'm a believer. I'm a big believer. I'm a big fan of you including Utah in this because, look, their defense is still going to be good. It always is. And I absolutely love the addition of Devin Dampier at quarterback. I mean, Utah, was it the worst or second worst passing grade in the Power 4 last year?
The worst.
The worst. I mean, you're talking about bottom of the barrel quarterback situation. Still just barely missed a bowl game. And I think with Dampier coming in and the run-heavy offense that they could have, he tied for the national lead in missed tackles forced by a quarterback on the ground. So I think when you look at the fit behind this offensive line, as physical as they can be with Dampier in there and the way he can operate with shots down the middle and play action, I'm with you. I think Utah and Kyle Whittingham, that wasn't the typical year we see from them last year. I'm in on a bounce back. I think they're going to contend for a Big 12 title.
Yeah, this is one of, I believe, two schools that I had a losing record last year that I have in my top 25. It's them and Auburn. I just think Utah is in for a big bounce back year. We've seen them be, playoff contenders before under Kyle Whittingham. They won back-to-back Pac-12 titles. Last year, everyone thought they were going to win the Big 12. I think they're a favorite preseason to win the Big 12, and obviously a 5-7 season. Defense is still really good under Kyle Whittingham, but the offense fell apart because of Cam Rising's injury and then all the other injuries they had at their quarterback situation too. I love Dampier coming in. He's one of the best Group of 5 quarterbacks we had last year. Very young kid too. I believe he was only a redshirt freshman last year at New Mexico. And then the offensive line is elite, man. I mean, that's a top 3 offensive line at least. You could argue them as the number 1 offensive line in the country. Maybe 2 first-round tackles in Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano, one of the best guards in the country, and Tanoa Togiai. All 5 guys were starters last year for Utah too. So an elite offensive line, a great mobile quarterback in Devin Dampier too. So you have a lot of holes to run through with that offensive line. If he can develop as a passer a little bit more, Utah can be dangerous next year. I think Utah is up there.
And look at these games. We talk sometimes about regression to the mean in close games. Look at some of these games, right? You talk about they lost by 1 score to Arizona State on a Friday night, and Cam Rising got hurt early in that game. TCU, they lost 13-7. Houston, they lost 17-14. BYU, they lost last minute. Iowa State, they played a tight game and lost by 3. All of these close games when they had far and away the worst quarterback situation last year because of Cam Rising's injuries in the Big 12. I mean, you look at that. If they had an average quarterback last year, they would have been sitting at or near the top of the standing. So I think there are not many teams that improve their quarterback situations more this offseason than Utah did with Devin Dampier. We're a big believer in this guy. New Mexico had a really fun offense last year with his dual threat abilities. Utah's in for a bounce back. And if you don't see it coming now, you're going to see it very early. I like their matchup week 1 against UCLA, and I like that their first Big 12 game, too, is against Texas Tech at home. That's going to be a lot of fun,
Yeah,
too.
Utah, our number 3 Big 12 team. The top 2 were Texas Tech at 17 and Arizona State at 16. I love what Texas Tech did this offseason in the transfer portal, bringing in so many star players, especially on that defensive line, getting guys like David Bailey coming in, Lee Hunter coming into Skylar Gill-Howard and Romello Height too. That defensive line all of a sudden went from a weakness last year to a top 3 unit in college football, in my opinion, too. The offense brought in some really good players, too, like Quentin Joyner. I think at running back could be really good. I think Baron Morton is a solid quarterback, going to be a little more consistent in 2025. But Texas Tech, again, I'm not going to spoil any picks just yet, but they are absolutely a contender to win the Big 12. And then obviously Arizona State as a defending Big 12 champion. They lost Cam Scadaboo, who was, I believe, in 5th place for the Heisman Trophy last year. But you bring back a top 3 quarterback in the country in Sam Leavitt and a top 3 wide receiver in the country in Jordan Tyson, the best quarterback receiver duo that we have in college football right now. And, of course, Kenny Dillingham is back as head coach, too. So I think Arizona State should still be deserves to be the top-ranked Big 12 team right now.
Yeah, no, as the defending champion, yes, but it just shows you with 4 teams within 6 spots there how tight that it's going to be, and who knows who else still emerges, because the Big 12 was so unpredictable last year that for their conference they got rid of the Big 12 media poll because all the teams at the bottom were rising to the top. Arizona State was picked to finish last, and they won the conference. So it is once again the most unpredictable conference in America.
What else stands out to you in that 11 through 20?
I want to throw in. Let's go to the Big 10 real quick, and I know kind of in the Big 10 now we've got the usual suspects. There's Penn State as maybe the prohibitive favorite. There's Ohio State as the defending national champs. There's Oregon, who was the Big 10 champions last year, and then obviously we've already talked about Michigan. But look at Indiana and Illinois. They're kind of thought to be in this second tier of the Big 10, and then right here you have them at 12 and 14. Both of them with excellent defenses, both of them with veteran quarterbacks. Obviously, Indiana made the playoff last year. Are we so sure? If they're ranked this high, are we so sure that they can't contend at the top of the Big Ten? It only takes one or two upsets, right? When you talk about what if Indiana were to go into Penn State and find a way to pull off an upset, right? What if Illinois were to find a way to pull off and Brett Bielema keeps this momentum going there? I don't think, when you talk about, when certain people talk about, okay, Penn State's going undefeated or Ohio State's going undefeated or whatever, Oregon's going to have another great year. There's some depth in this Big Ten, especially in what's being called the second tier of it, but you've got a team that made the playoff last year at number 12 here and another very talented team at 14 in Illinois. These are dangerous football teams, and I don't think any of what's being considered the top teams in the Big Ten should take them lightly at all.
Illinois had an incredible year last year, 10-3 record. They're number 16 in the final AP poll. So that doubled their win total from the previous year and was their highest ranking in the final AP poll in 23 years. It also matched the program record for most wins in a season. And then they brought back 18 of the 27 players who played 300 snaps for them last year. So continuity for that team. And then Indiana, too. Indiana, they lost, guys like Curtis Rourke and other guys from that really good team that made the playoff last year. But you bring back Carter Smith, who's a top 10 tackle in the country, in my opinion. Bring back Elijah Surratt, top 5 receiver in the country, in my opinion. Mikhail Kamara led the nation in pressures last year at edge defender. D'Angelo Pons is a top 3 cornerback in the country too, and a lot of other great players still on that team. So I think Indiana, after making the playoff last year, you bring in Fernando Mendoza, who some people think could be a top 10 pick in the 2026 NFL draft at quarterback. I think Indiana is well positioned to maybe make another playoff run next year.
Guys like Mendoza, like Roman Hemby coming in at running back and they've got a good group of running backs there. I think is underrated. You mentioned you still have Surratt on the outside. You still have the nation's leader in pressures and Mikhail Kamara coming off the edge and a really, really good defense. I think that's the foundation of this team first is their defensive star power. Indiana, they're not going anywhere. That was not a fluke. They're not going to turn around and go 4-8 this year. This is a darn good football team. Again, starts with their defense, and then it's just a matter of how quickly Mendoza can get acclimated to the offense. But I do think it's an offense that fits his skill set well.
We also have a lot of ACC schools here in 11 through 20. The second-ranked ACC school for us is Miami at number 11. Then we also have, obviously, Louisville, SMU, is also ranked in the top 20 for us too. So a lot of ACC schools don't. We think all of them could be competing for probably the title of second best in ACC because I think there's a clear favorite right now in that conference, but it is wide open after number 1.
That is the big question because everybody, let's just say it out loud, everybody's going to pick Clemson to at least be in the ACC title game, if not win the ACC, right? Yep. Obviously, they're the most talented team. They weren't even supposed to win the ACC last year, and they did it anyway, right? But you look at last year's second-place team, SMU, lost a lot of pieces on defense, but you still have Kevin Jennings and a high-flying offense. What does Miami look like with Carson Beck? And I'm really excited to see what Louisville looks like with Miller Moss in there as a quarterback, right? The last 2 years we've seen what Jeff Brom has done with Jack Plummer 2 years ago making the ACC title game, with Tyler Shuck having a top 10 quarterback season, eventually being a second-round pick in the draft for him last year. They just had they faltered on defense in the secondary a bit last year at Louisville, but I think when you look at, to me, Miller Moss and then the tandem at running back that they have, Isaac Brown and Duke Watson, that could be a potentially explosive offense. So the race for what we think is probably second place in the ACC,
which could still be a playoff spot,
which could still, I mean, you had two teams, both teams in the ACC title game last year made the playoffs, right? So I mean, you're talking about, it is not a gimme that you have to win the ACC necessarily. If you were to say run the table or maybe even go 11-1, and then let's say Clemson, you lose to them anyway in the ACC, you still have a road. SMU proved that last year, that if you get the job done the rest of the season, you can still make the playoff. We got 2 ACC teams last year, so that second spot there in the ACC title game, we assume, is going to be really, really coveted.
It's wide open. And there's even other schools I think are sleepers in that conference, like Georgia Tech and Duke, that are probably, like I said, in the 26 to 35
Duke's
range.
Duke's a fun one. That's going to be a fun one.
But I think those are the three right there. I'm a big fan of. I still like SMU a lot with Kevin Jennings coming back, top 10 quarterback in the country, in my opinion. Great safeties they have in that defense, too. And then, obviously, Louisville, you mentioned it right there. I mean, Jeff Brom has done an amazing job there at Louisville. And now you have Willard Moss coming in, who, he got benched at USC last year, but Dalton and I are so big fans of him. His offensive line at USC wasn't very good at all. So I think he kind of got let down by them last year, but he has an elite run game to rely on, and Isaac Brown and Duke Watson, too. And then, obviously, Miami at the top at number 11. Miami, yes, they lost a lot of talent from last year's team that just missed out on the playoff last year. Obviously, Cam Ward being the number 1 overall pick hurts. But Carson Beck, I think, was the best transfer quarterback this offseason. He's still a top 5 quarterback in the country, in my opinion. Kind of people forget about how good he was in 2023. And also, he was still pretty good last year, right? It wasn't as disastrous of a year as a lot of people make it out to be for Carson Beck at Georgia. I think his problem was at Georgia, the receiving core completely let him down at Georgia. Now, there is a question mark at Miami in that receiving core too, considering so many guys went to the NFL from that receiving core, but they still have some talented recruits that are coming up in their second and third years in the program at Miami too. So that's the question mark is, okay, is the receiving core better for Carson Beck? Because Carson Beck is one of those quarterbacks mentioned before, like Jackson Arnold and maybe Bryce Underwood at Michigan. He needs a good supporting cast. But if you give him a good supporting cast, Carson Beck can be a top 5 quarterback in the country.
Still a big opportunity here for Miami because you look at 2 of their out-of-conference games. Notre Dame week 1 and Florida week 4. You go, even if, let's say you split those 2, run the table in the ACC because they're not playing Clemson in the regular season, right? Then all of a sudden, if you're 11-1, and let's say you're 11-1 and your one loss is Notre Dame, I think at that point, win or lose in the ACC title game, you might be playing with house money, honestly, with a win over Florida on your resume, say win over Louisville, SMU. And the fun part about Miami's schedule, I think this was brought up to me in the last week or so, they don't leave the state of Florida until November 1st.
It's crazy.
They only leave the state of Florida 3 times, and that's November against SMU, Virginia Tech, Pitt. So they only once leave the Eastern time zone, and they only leave the state of Florida 3 times.
Yeah, I think actually we talk a lot about Carson Beck. Their strength, though, is going to be trenches next year. Their O-line is very good. D-line is still nasty with Ruben Bain. So I think Miami could beat up some teams in the trenches next year. Last one before we move on to the top 10, I promise. South Carolina, I think a lot of people are very high on them this year as maybe a playoff team. We still think they can be a playoff team. I have them at number 15 overall right now. It's a very high ceiling, low floor team is how I describe South Carolina.
I think to me, there's obviously Lenora Sellers in his development as a passer. We still, as of right now, don't have any answers on their running back, Rasul Faison, and his eligibility issues. To me, though, it's actually, are they going to play like a top 5 defense? Last year, they were I believe, one of the 5 best defenses in college football. Kyle Kennard is gone. TJ Sanders is gone. Tonka Hemingway's gone. Demetrius Knight is gone. Nicky Manwari's gone. If there's anybody else I'm missing, O'Donnell Fortune's gone. They have lost, and they have talent. You still have Dylan Stewart. You still have guys like Brian Thomas Jr. I think you still have Deku Smith on the back end. Is that right?
I believe so, yeah.
Right? So there are guys, but they lost a boatload of talent to the NFL draft on defense. I want to see if Clayton White's going to have this looking like a top 5 defense again, or if there's any regression there, is the offense going to have to carry even more of a load? Is Lenora Sellers going to have to win games, at times by himself? What is that going to look like? Because I'm expecting it's still going to be a good defense. But I am expecting some regression because they were so loaded defensively last year.
Yeah, Jalen Kogor is a pretty good player at nickel too. But yeah, they should have some regression defensively, and it's all on Sellers next year. Sellers needs to take that next step. A lot of people think he is the number 1 prospect in next year's draft. Maybe he could be a number 1 overall pick. He's very Anthony Richardson-like, though, where the highs are super high. The lows are pretty low, though, too, right? He's got to get a little more accurate, have better decision-making out there, but he is probably the toolsiest quarterback in the country. Hopefully, Nick Harbor can make good of his elite tools, too. Maybe he might be the toolsiest receiver we've seen in a decade, probably, honestly. But a lot of potential at South Carolina. But there's also a chance they go 7-5 or 8-4 next year, right? There's also a chance they don't make the college football playoff next year too. So that's why they're number 15. Is okay. They're the most boom or bust team, I would say, in college football going into next year. All right, let's get into the top 10 now. At number 10, another SEC school that's also a little bit boom or bust. That is the Florida Gators, who really turned it on down the stretch last year, Dalton, and they have a great quarterback coming back in DJ Lagway. Might have more potential than any other quarterback in college football, and that offense is loaded, and the defensive line is really good too.
You've got a terrific offensive line. You've got an excellent receiving core. I think especially I need Trey Wilson healthy. That's the guy I need healthy to make a lot of those easy throws easier for DJ Lagway. You've got Jaden Baugh in the backfield, but this is really, you mentioned boomer bust. I think it's DJ Lagway. Top 5 deep passing grade in the country last year. Not great on things underneath. Got to work. Hopefully he worked on the footwork and the accuracy and just having more consistent mechanics in the pocket. If he did that, this is a potentially explosive offense that could put up a lot of points. We've even been talking about earlier this week the true freshman receiver Dallas Wilson, who could add some juice into that receiving core as well. But I think that's what you look at with Florida is if Lagway plays a little bit more consistently, especially on underneath throws, they could score with anybody.
Yeah.
And if you could score with anybody on that level with a quarterback that talented, especially with an offensive line that's going to protect him, you can play with anybody even in the SEC.
You can score anyone, and that defensive line is nasty. Tyreek Sapp, one of the best edge rushers in the country. Caleb Banks could be a first-round pick at D-tackle, too, as a very good defensive line. Top 15 defensive line, in my opinion, next year. Actually, probably top 10 defensive line, I should say, going into next year. Yeah, I think Florida, just that offense is really enticing, man. With DJ Lagway, hopefully he can take the next step in his development. And yes, we've seen, he wasn't, at times wasn't great last year. You got to remember, he's a true freshman playing in the SEC when he thought he was going to be a backup all year to Graham Mertz. And you had to play when Graham Mertz goes down with an injury. So I think as a sophomore with a full offseason as a starter, could take a big year 2 jump. And like I said, he was the number 1 quarterback out of high school. So much potential. You see the arm talent. It pops off tape. I think Lagway could have a huge year next year. The receiving core, big fan of that receiving core too, with Trey Wilson, J. Michael Sertivan, and then now Dallas Wilson apparently is turning heads. They also have a 5-star true freshman in Vernell Brown too in that receiving core. The offensive line is a top 5 offensive line in the country. Jake Slaughter is the best interior offensive lineman in the country, in my opinion, too. And then Jaden Baugh was really good last year as a true freshman running back. So they also have a good run game to rely on, too. That offense, if they could have the balance with Jaden Baugh and DJ Lagway and that offensive line kicking ass up there and those receivers really being as good as we think they can be, like you said, Florida could have one of the best offenses in college football next year.
Similar feel to me as a team as Miami last year, where potentially explosive offense, really good D-line. Can the back 7 hold up? And the backs,
That's a good point.
There's 2 things about this with Florida. Their secondary. I need their secondary to not give up so many explosive plays. And their schedule. I don't know what it is about the Florida Gators that they just walk into every year with the hardest schedule. But at LSU, at Miami, Texas, at A&M, Georgia, at Ole Miss, Tennessee, plus the Florida State game at the end if they're any better. But I mean, that's the only other thing where I go, it's just we're going to be talking about the Florida Gators every single week this season just about because they just have huge games every week. But that's what I'm looking for when you look at, even just the quarterbacks at it with Garrett Nussmeier, Carson Beck, Arch Manning, even Austin Simmons in that offense, right? Secondary's got to be better. To me, it's all about coverage. If the Gators, just like Miami last year, if they have anything in the secondary, they can absolutely be a top 10
That's a great
team.
point because Cam Ward going into last year was seen as a boom or bust quarterback as well as DJ Lagway. Well, the boom hit for Cam Ward. He was the best quarterback in the country in our opinion last year. Hopefully the boom hits for DJ Lagway at Florida. They just come in at number 10 in our ranking. At number 9, another SEC school with a great offense and some question marks on defense is the LSU Tigers, who have obviously been a little disappointing under Brian Kelly so far with no playoff appearances yet, but he brings back a top 5 quarterback in the country in Garrett Nussmeier. So some great weapons for him to work with at receiving core. Caden Durham back at running back too. But Dawn, they got a lot of defensive transfers coming in, so you're hoping the defense can be better because that's really what's held them back from making the playoff, even with guys like Jaden Daniels and Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors a couple years ago, and then obviously Garrett Nussmeier and everyone last year. They missed the playoff because even though the offense was probably the best in the country or among the best in the country, the defense was not even close to being that. And then also the other question mark I have, they lost 4 starters on what was an elite offensive line last year, including all 4 guys were drafted, by the way, including a top 5 pick in Will Campbell. Well, the guy who's not really that mobile in Garrett Nussmeier, will that really hurt the offense next year?
I mean, that's matchup-wise, we're going to talk about it a lot. They're playing Clemson week 1, maybe the best D-line in the country, playing Florida, South Carolina, at Alabama later in the year, at Oklahoma later in the year. Some of those matchups when it comes to the trenches are going to be big for this offense. But I'm looking at LSU and I'm looking at the defense, right? The last 2 years, their pass defense has held up an elite offense from going to the playoff. And this year, look, they did. They hit the portal. They got Patrick Payton at defensive end. They got A.J. Halsey at safety. They got Mansour Delane at corner. They're getting Harold Perkins back at linebacker from injury, and who knows what his role is going to be and how much he could even add to the pass rush. Pass defense.
And DJ Pickett coming in. Maybe he's an impact star.
6'5" true freshman corner and DJ Pickett coming in. Maybe he contributes early on, right? Ashton Stamps is still there. But I just think that's where it is. You have to make up this gap that LSU has on defense. Their pass defense you had Jaden Daniels with a Heisman season, and they lost 3 games because of their defense, and they gave up, I think it was 42 points a game in those games. Last year, I think about, say, the Alabama game or even the Florida game where they just couldn't make a stop, and then they were asking Nussmeier to do too much to win ball games. They need to balance this out, and you mentioned it. Look, Nussmeier's a pocket quarterback, and he improvised a little, but not at an elite level like some of these other guys we talk about. 4 new starters on the offensive line. Clemson and Florida are 2 of your first 3 games.
Yeah,
rough.
Tough.
Rough. Your number 1 defensive line in Clemson, and where'd you have Florida? Number 5 or 6?
5 or 6, yeah.
Somewhere in there. I mean, we're going to find out real early what LSU has in the trenches because those 2 teams are coming at you with their defensive lines, and it's not easy. LSU, there's a lot of pressure on them. Absolutely. They have a boatload of talent. To me, make up the gap on defense and make sure you can pass protect.
Yeah, that's the biggest question with LSU next year. We didn't even mention Whit Weeks is also a top 3 linebacker in the country, too. So I think actually LSU's defense in the middle of it with the linebackers are elite. I think that LSU linebacker unit is one of the best in the country with Whit Weeks and Harold Perkins Jr. The D-line I have questions about, and the secondary I have a little bit less questions about because of the guys they brought in, but you're hoping those guys can all hit for LSU next year, too. So again, it's kind of like the story with Florida a little bit, and even with the Miami question last year, even Miami questions this year is, okay, the offense could be very elite, but will the defense hold up for them, right? And that's been the question mark for LSU the last couple of years, and it's why they haven't made the playoff in the last couple of years, and they didn't make the top 25 of the AP poll finishing last year either with a 9-4 record. But you're hoping this year is the year for it with Garrett Nussmeier now in his final year as LSU's quarterback before he moves on to the NFL. You're hoping you can make a playoff run this year for LSU, or else if you don't make that, a lot of questions could be asked about Brian Kelly and his tenure there in LSU. All right, number 8. This one will ruffle some feathers, Dawn, because I've seen this team at number 1 in some rankings and a lot higher than number 8 in a lot of other rankings. I have Georgia at number 8. Now I get it. Kirby Smart has been the most probably consistently elite coach that we have in college football. I think he's the best coach in college football. And they have a really good defense once again, even after losing 3 first-round picks on that defense. However, I have question marks offensively. Gunnar Stockton didn't look great last year in place of Carson Beck. Now, to his credit, he played against Texas and he played against Notre Dame, who are 2 of the elite defenses we had in college football last year. So it makes sense. And he wasn't a full-time starter either, so he kind of got thrown to the wolves in those 2 games. But still, didn't look great in those 2 games. I think they might have downgraded at quarterback. That offensive line lost 3 elite starters from the interior. All 3 of them were drafted, so I have question marks there too. That receiving core should be a little bit better with guys like Zachariah Branch and Noah Thomas coming in, but you're banking on them being stars for your program too. I just have too many questions with really the passing game for Georgia right now. That's why they're number 8. They're still a playoff contender, absolutely, but I'm not as high in them, and I don't think Georgia right now is a national title contender this year. It's
tough because what we saw from Gunnar Stockton in 2 games against arguably the 2 best secondaries in the country last year, it wasn't great. So there's a lot where you go, okay, maybe there's more development to be had there and he could be a little bit better than what we saw. Their defense, especially the back 7 of their defense, is going to be spectacular. It just about always is. I love their secondary. But the other question for me is actually their defensive line, right? They had 6 defensive linemen, I believe it was, that played at least 300 snaps last year. They're all gone. Right? So you've got a defensive line that's incredibly young, an offensive line that's incredibly young. They were already struggling at tackle with pass protection off the edge last year. Certainly I remember the Ole Miss game. That's the reason they lost that football game. But I think Georgia is really hard to project this year, maybe harder than any other year because they're going to be very young quarterback, O-line, D-line. They've got a lot of new receivers in there, right? Noah Thomas and Zachariah Branch. They do have a good group of tight ends. They do have a good group of running backs. And then they're hard because you look at their schedule and you go, there's only 2 big road game. I mean, you've got Tennessee on the road, Auburn on the road, Georgia Tech, and I still think they're better than Georgia Tech. But, I mean,
Who's their home games? They have Texas, right?
They get Texas at home. They get Alabama at home. They get Ole Miss at home. They get Florida neutral and Jacksonville as always. I think that's moving next year to Atlanta, right? I believe so.
Yeah.
But I
hate that, by the way.
I just think with Georgia, it's like you feel like Kirby Smart and the defense is going to find a way for him to win enough games, probably even to get to the playoff. How much can the offense, how balanced can they be on offense? Can Stockton give them enough? Can they protect Stockton enough in order to do that? Because look how many teams we're seeing loading up offensively in the SEC. Alabama's loaded. Texas is loaded. Auburn's loaded. South Carolina's got the quarterback. Florida's loaded. Even a team like Missouri's got some really good offensive play. Like, can Georgia continue to win just grinding games out like they did last year? Because that's what it became even with Carson Beck in there.
And even like I've seen so many Georgia fans, argue saying, well, listen, we won 2 national titles with Stetson Bennett at quarterback. We could do it with Gunnar Stockton. Here's what I'll say about that. 1, Stetson Bennett was a very good college quarterback. So let's just say that right now. 2, that was one of the all-time defenses that Georgia had. It's still going to be a great one this year. I still like a lot of the pieces they have defensively, but it's not like all 11 guys are going to play in the NFL. Like, I just don't think it'll be an all-time defense like that. Now, I am totally prepared for this ranking to look so stupid at the end of the year. Because you look at it right now, Georgia has not finished below number 7 in the final AP poll since 2016, which was Kirby Smart's first year as the head coach. So they have gone top 7 or better every year since 2017. So the fact that I have number 8 right now, history-wise, is pretty stupid because of what they've done under Kirby Smart in the last 8 or so years. But I just look at that offense right now. I've never been this low, I think, on Georgia going into a year in probably like 8 or 9 years.
Well, and we say this low, and there's a good chance, I haven't figured it all out yet, but there's a good chance I'm going to still find a way to get him into the playoff.
I think I have my playoff too. So.
And I just don't think with this offense as it stands, I can tell you I won't pick them to win the whole thing.
No. If they win the whole thing this year, this is the best coaching job Kirby Smart's ever had in his career.
I'll give you that. Because, again, it's not just Gunnar Stockton. It's, to me, O-line and D-line against a bunch of teams in the SEC that are getting really good on the O-line and D-line. I mean, Texas is good there every year. Florida's got nasty O-line, D-line, right? Tennessee with their defensive, even going to Tennessee in week 3, right, for Gunnar Stockton's first big game this year. If Georgia has questions in pass protection, that's not the team you want to have them against on the road, right? With Rocky Top and all that stuff and Josh Josephs and those guys up front. So, and then the next game that they have 2 weeks later is against Alabama, and they have a nasty defense. So I think we're gonna get answered a lot about Gunnar Stockton early, but this team in the trenches, I think this Georgia team is as young in the trenches as we've seen recently.
Got our guy Chase Davis in the chat saying Georgia 8 is valid. So he actually says, you know what? I was worried about how the reaction would be to Georgia at number 8, but Chase actually thinks it's pretty valid. He thinks Auburn will beat Georgia this year.
Ooh.
So that's a call right there, too.
At Auburn? We've seen that get wild before.
One of us, Zach Tantillo's burner right there.
It might be. There's a chance. We'll see if he's got an alias.
All right. Georgia number 8. At number 7 is Oregon. So another team that I have some questions about in their passing game right now. But Oregon should still have a great defense under former Georgia defensive coordinator Dan Lanning. Still be a great defense there. Offensively, so have a really good offensive line. Got a great running back in the portal in Mekhi Hughes. Dante Moore has a lot of potential, right? He's the number 2 quarterback coming out of high school in the 2023 high school class, the number 3 overall recruit in that class too. Sat on the bench last year, and what I thought was a great career move for him behind Dylan Gabriel. Just learned under him, learned that offense. Now he's going to start this year. But this, obviously, he didn't look great in his freshman year at UCLA, but it wasn't a great supporting cast either there. So you have some questions about Dante Moore, but also that receiving core, losing Tez Johnson to the NFL. Evan Stewart is probably going to be out for the entire season this year, too. You're banking on DeCorian Moore, who we broke down already on Monday, your true freshman receiver being your number 1 guy. So some questions in that passing game for Oregon right now. But with that defense, with that run game, with Dante Moore, with that offensive line, Oregon should still be one of the contenders to win the Big Ten this year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think they're still you should still consider them a top 3 team in the Big Ten, considering the talent they have. Now, obviously, they lost a lot off a team that went undefeated in the regular season last year and then lost to Ohio State in the playoff. But Dante Moore is the big question, right? The last 2 years they've gone out, or I should say 3 years, really. They had Bo Nix for 2. But talk about veteran quarterbacks coming in the portal and Bo Nix and then Dylan Gabriel and being Heisman finalists. I don't know if we have those level of expectations for Dante Moore, But you mentioned it. The key is that he got to sit down and learn the offense and really have a chance to take a breath after kind of a tumultuous freshman season at UCLA, where at times he looked good. He's got really good arm talent. There's a reason he was a highly rated recruit. But now you're talking about an offense that's really predicated on making the safe throws, right? And making the efficient throws and moving the chains and playing with pace, right? As opposed to just ripping it downfield all the time. So, Will Stein, I think this is a very interesting year for offensive coordinator Will Stein, because he had to develop Bo Nix at the time because he was a gunslinger a bit, but this is really the first quarterback, really young quarterback I think he's had to develop and take through a summer of really, getting these reps as the starting quarterback. They have a good O-line. They're going to be able to run the ball with Hughes and Whittington. They've got a solid defense. You know how much I love Dylan Thieneman. It's going to be about, can they balance this offense out? If they can do that, absolutely, they could win the Big Ten again. Why not? It's just going to be a matter. We have more questions about Dante Moore than we did about Bo Nix or Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah. Well, probably. Yeah, I would say so.
Nix, the first year, was coming in as a guns, but Nix, that second year, we knew what we were getting.
Yes.
And he still had started more at Auburn.
True. That is true.
Moore did. Moore got, 6 starts at UCLA?
Yeah, and it wasn't very pretty.
Right. It was, and that whole situation was kind of ugly, right?
Yeah.
And he was a true freshman trying to carry that UCLA offense. I think this is a different environment for him. Obviously, a good one. And look, you get a fun runway. Oregon should start 4-0
at least.
And then you get Penn State, Indiana. Let's go. I mean, that's where it's at right there. Those 2 games are going to decide a lot.
Indiana at home, though, I will say.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be 2 excellent defenses.
But this is a team that I absolutely expect to make the playoff next year, because I think you just look at that schedule. They don't play Ohio State. They avoid some other top teams like Illinois and Michigan and all that. The non-conference schedule is pretty easy. I mean, really, it's not that hard at all, considering you play Montana State, Oklahoma State, who was a disaster last year, doesn't look too much better this year either. And then Oregon State, too, is basically a group of 5 team at this point. So Oregon should go 3-0 in the non-conference slate. And the conference slate is relatively easy compared to some other ones, too. Penn State Penn State and Indiana is the only 2 teams that are ranked in our rankings right now. So Oregon should still make the playoff next year, but I'm not as high in them as I was last year. Last year, Dalton and I thought Oregon was a top 3 team in the country, absolutely in the inner circle of a national title contender. Don't think Oregon is in the inner circle this year. I think Oregon's right outside that.
Only thing I'll say with the playoff bit, if they were to lose to both Penn State and Indiana, and they're 10-2 on this schedule, that gets shaky. Because Indiana beating Oregon, if they were to do that, especially at Oregon, that would skyrocket their chances.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it would get an Oregon team at 10-2.
The best win would be USC. Or Iowa. Maybe.
Right. I mean, Oregon at 10-2 would get shaky when it comes to at-large.
Right. All right, let's move on from number 7 to a team that made the national title game last year at number 6. That is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Obviously, brand new quarterback. We don't know who it'll be yet, but we expect it to be C.J. Carr, the redshirt freshman, who's the number 6 quarterback coming out of high school, replacing Riley Leonard there. But Dalton, we said this time and time again. The reason why Notre Dame made the national title game last year was because of the run game. It was because of their secondary. They should have both those things be playing at an elite level in 2025. The best running back in America, Jeremiah Love, an excellent stable of running backs behind him too. That secondary is still elite with Leonard Moore, the best cornerback in the country, and some other great players in that secondary too. I think Notre Dame is still, if C.J. Carr is a better passer than Riley Leonard, which is actually pretty possible. Riley Leonard was not great as a passer last year. If they get more of an element with a better receiving core this year too, and a really good offensive line blocking for him too, Notre Dame could absolutely still contend for a national title next year.
Absolutely. I mean, the quarterback question is the big one, and it feels like the theme of college football this year is which team's inexperienced quarterback is going to step up. And right now, there is still a competition between C.J. Carr and Kenny Minchey. I think Carr's a little bit more of a natural passer for Mike Denbrock's offense, but Minchey is still obviously in the fight. And I think even if he's not the starter, he can add a dimension into the run game. That, I mean, honestly, that's really the most of what Riley Leonard brought last year was an extra dimension in the quarterback run game in certain games. I think about the Georgia game. I think about the Louisville game. His legs were a big factor. But, I mean, Notre Dame, you look at them and you go, look, if they win their first two games are Miami and Texas A&M, they start 2-0, they're probably going 12-0 at that point, especially if they get through the first 2 games of whoever the quarterback is going to be and still come out with wins against ranked teams, barring, obviously, the usual random Notre Dame upset. We should, if they start 2-0, we should expect them to go 12-0.
Keep in mind, too, with the new playoff format this year, Notre Dame is eligible for a first-round bye. It's no longer the top 4 seeds have to be conference champions. Notre Dame, they're seeding at 1 through 12 now. So there still is 5 conference champions that are guaranteed a spot in, but they're going to seed them 1 through 12. So Notre Dame at 12-0 is eligible for one of the top 4 seeds and a first-round bye in the college football playoff too. And I think that's certainly possible with them next year. Honestly, with those first two games are tough, hardest games of the year for them by far. But after that, they could go 12-0 as long as they don't slip up the rest of the year. So I agree with you there. And I think, again, Notre Dame's defense with that secondary and their offense with what could be an improved passer at quarterback, a great offensive line, an amazing running back in Jeremiah Love, and a pretty good top 10 receiving core in the country too. I think Notre Dame absolutely, and also Anthony Tresh on the sidelines too. Can't forget that. Notre Dame absolutely is still a national title contender.
The only thing I'll say is that where it gets a little dangerous, and last year they had the one big upset with Northern Illinois. But flip side, Miami and Texas A&M are 2 really good teams, and somebody for Notre Dame is going to be making their first 2 career starts. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame starts 0-2. I don't know that they can claw back this year.
I don't think so either.
I think you almost feel like they do with this schedule. I know there's some fun ones. It's at Arkansas, they're okay. Boise State at home, USC at home, right? At Pitt, maybe. Your Syracuse Orange.
Don't forget them.
I never do. You don't let me. But, I mean, it's just if they – let's just say this quarterback situation against 2 tough teams doesn't go as great early in the year. You start 0-2, you got some real issues there in South Bend also.
Other thing I want to mention, too, on the other side of the ball, the one question mark I have defensively for Notre Dame, great linebackers, amazing secondary. That defensive line wasn't great last year, and also they've lost some key pieces from it, too. A&M and Miami both have elite offensive lines.
Don't forget, too, you've got a new defensive coordinator also.
Yes.
You've got Chris Ash now coming in for Al Golden. Al Golden here in Cincinnati. There are some questions with Notre Dame. The big one for me, it's got to be the quarterback.
Yes.
I mean, that's where it's at. If they get through those first 2, even if they go 1-1 through those first 2, still feel pretty good about them, right? At 11-1, they're going to put Notre Dame in. They're going to be probably in the top 6 or 7, right? But that's what we're looking at with them is a lot of things that are stable with them, which is why they're this high. Figure out the quarterback.
All right. From one team that lost the national title game at number 6 to the team that won the national title game at number 5, that is the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, yes, Ohio State had 14 players that were drafted in the 2025 NFL draft, tied for the second most by a school in one draft ever. But even after losing so much talent, they still have the 2 best players in college football in Jeremiah Smith and in Caleb Downs. Usually, and I've seen some rankings already, and I completely understand why, the defending national champion is always starting off number 1 or number 2 as a sign of respect for that school. But I also just have some question marks with Ohio State, a brand new quarterback, obviously, in either Julian Sayin or Lincoln Keenholz. And also, on really the bigger question for me, the trenches on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. That's where I have some questions. But when you have the 2 best players in the country, and Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs, you're defending national champion, you're probably going to find somewhere in the top 5.
I mean, you have the 2 best players in the country, and I mean, let's face it, they're Ohio State, right?
Yes.
They're gonna find a way to be floating around this range, right? Unless something really goes bad with the quarterback situation. But I'm with you. It's another team with an inexperienced quarterback, no matter which way they go, and a defense that lost 8 of their 11 starters. I mean, that's and you could argue it was overall the best defense in the country by the end of last year. But you're talking about all 4 starters up front of the defensive line gone. Several starters on the offensive line gone, right? You're dealing with a lot of inexperience in the trenches, and in the Big Ten, and certainly in their first game against Texas, that's going to be a factor, right? I mean, for as much, youth as there is at quarterback, but I think the trench question, we had questions about their offensive line during their playoff run last year. It's the reason they lost the Michigan game, and now they're even younger than that group was. And then their defensive line, I mean, you look at especially their pass rush. I know there's some other guys like Kenyatta Jackson that a lot of people believe in right now, but just haven't seen it yet. Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau leading the team in pressures by a mile. Where are they going to find the pass rush? I think,
and then a first-round D tackle on Tyler Williams.
And a first-round run stop and D tackle. And obviously, Ty Hamilton was also very good. You're losing all 4 of the front 4. And so let's, it's kind of the old Detroit Lions situation we talked about on the NFL show this morning. This is a team that lost both coordinators, right? You're going from Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles now to Brian Hartline, who's obviously been in the system a long time, and to Matt Patricia on defense. How much difference the play calling going to look? Because I think Kelly and Knowles calling plays last year was a massive reason that they also won the national title.
It was the best coordinator pairing by far in the country.
The adjustments that both of them made on their side of the ball was just as big as anything the players did. So I think there are a lot of questions at Ohio State between the talent they've lost and the two elite coordinators that they've lost, one of them going to Penn State now.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also the other one going to the NFL. Chip Kelly's now with the Las Vegas Raiders as the OC there too. But still, obviously, they deserve a spot in the top 5 for the talent they still have there. It's Ohio State too. They're always somewhere in the top 10 at the end of the year. I think Ohio State is still absolutely a contender. If Julian Sayin comes in or Lincoln Keno's comes in and live up to the, Sayin was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. If he could live up to that, I think he will be the starter for Ohio State over Lincoln Keenholz. But I just think there is still potential for Ohio State with Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith and the best receiving core in the country. Max Clare coming in at tight end, a top 5 tight end in the country, top 3 tight end in the country, really. So there's still potential there, but losing both star running backs too, we mentioned them, Quinshon Judkins and Trayvon Henderson gone, have some question marks there. C.J. Thompson's a solid running back coming in from West Virginia, but not superstar like those two were. So there's question marks at Ohio State, but it's Ohio State. They won the national title last year, even with some question marks last year too. They deserve a spot in the top 5 here. Big game week 1. Texas week 1, it's a massive game for both teams, kind of established, okay, who were the actual elite teams in college football in 2025. At number 4, this might get some heat too, I think. But at number 4, we got Alabama. And I understand Alabama lost to Vanderbilt last year. They lost to Oklahoma last year too. They went 9-4 overall. 4 losses in a season for Alabama in Kalen DeBoer's first year as a head coach. That has not happened since Nick Saban's first year as head coach in 2007. So it's been 17 years since Alabama lost 4 games in a season. So why on earth are they number 4 after what was a really disappointing last year for Alabama? This defense is freaking loaded. They have, in my opinion, the best defense in college football heading into next year. They have a top 10 player at every single defensive position, whether it be edge, D tackle, linebacker, corner, safety. Top 10 player everywhere. Unreal defense. Offensive line, for me, the number 1 in the country. You got Parker Brailsford back. You got Jaden Roberts back. You got Kane Proctor, who could be a top 10 pick back at left tackle. You have Ryan Williams back, the cover of EA College Football 26 star, the number 2 receiver in the country, in my opinion, too. A really good receiving core outside of him. They always have a really deep backfield, a lot of former 4- and 5-star recruits in that running back room, too. Ty Simpson now takes over at quarterback. He might be a better fit for Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb than Jalen Milroe was, honestly. Simpson was a former 5-star recruit who sat on the bench for 3 years, so he's waited his turn as a former 5-star. Not a lot of former 5-stars would wait 3 years to play. Bama, I think, is one of the biggest candidates to be a bounce-back team next year. Not only make the playoff next year, Dalton, they could compete for a national title next year.
I think they should expect to make the playoff. I think they're playoff or bust. There's going to be real questions asked in Tuscaloosa if they don't at least make the playoff and probably win at least one playoff game. They've got a boatload of talent. Again, and this is the theme. We've seen it now with 3 teams in a row here in this top 6 where boatload of talent, inexperienced quarterback, first-year starter, Ty Simpson. Now, I like what we've seen from Ty Simpson, the little bit that we have seen from him, and I'm with you. I think the addition of Ryan Grubb back together with Kalen DeBoer after a year with the Seattle Seahawks, I think that is going to be big for just the offense, the management of the offense and this passing game and being able, like you mentioned, Jalen Milroe, he was great at a lot of things. Throwing the ball on time was not necessarily one of them. Ty Simpson's a guy who's going to throw the ball on time. He's accurate. You're sacrificing, obviously, the elite rushing ability that Jalen Milroe gives you, but
he can run too, though. Simpson.
He can run a little bit. He's not gonna do what Milroe did to LSU last year and what is it, 200-something yards or whatever that was against LSU. He's not going to do that, but he can take off and get a first down when he needs to. But the bigger thing is he's going to throw the football on time. I think this vertical passing attack, and I think, I'm telling you, I see a lot of CeeDee Lamb and Ryan Williams. And CeeDee Lamb, year 2 at Oklahoma, went crazy. I think Ryan Williams, Alabama, year 2, could go absolutely nuts. And you mentioned the foundation this defense gives you. They just have a boatload of talent. I mean, I know, again, things were down at the end of last year for Alabama, but I'm with you. I'm in. I think the bounce back is on. I expect this team to be one of the best in the country.
You got LT Overton at edge rusher. You got Tim Keenan at D tackle. Deontay Lawson at linebacker. Cam Calhoun and a bunch of other great corners in that secondary. Keon Sabb at safety. Bray Hubbard at safety. I was just like loaded defense next year. And yeah, Ryan Williams, who, by the way, just turned 18 years old, by the way. So we could finally stop.
We won't hear about that at all.
We can finally stop saying he's 17 years old. Ryan Williams is now 18 years old, heading into his true sophomore year. But Alabama, I'm all in on them this year. I think they're really going to have a huge bounce back year. And I think this top 4 top 6, I would say, really kind of separates himself from everyone else. But Alabama, I think, is in the inner circle for national title contenders in 2025. All right, top 3, I think for most people is similar. At number 3 for me personally is Penn State. I think Penn State right now is the favorite to win the Big Ten in 2025, and really the biggest reason why, besides Abdul Carter and Tyler Warren, who I understand were both absolute superstars last year in college football and 2 top 15 picks in the NFL draft, I understand that those are 2 big losses. Besides that, pretty much everyone else is back for Penn State. So I think you bring back Drew Aller, you bring back Nick Singleton and Katron Allen to have, in my opinion, the best backfield in college football. You really improve the receiving core this offseason in the transfer portal, bringing in Trevor Pena, bringing in Devontae Ross and Kyron Hudson. Tight end, yes, they lost Tyler Warren, but Penn State has had a top 5 tight end in recruiting classes in like 3 straight years now, so they're very well positioned to replace that production at tight end. A really good offensive line blocking for them too. Defensively, Denai Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, 2 star defensive linemen, a great linebacker room at Penn State too, and then a really good secondary headlined by A.J. Harris at cornerback. So Penn State, yes, Warren and Carter are gone, and they're both superstars, but they brought back pretty much everyone else from a team that made it all the way to the college football playoff semifinals last year. There is a chance for Penn State to have even a deeper run in 2025.
This is the year. They have to do it this year.
And by the way, Jim Knowles coming in. I mentioned that.
And Jim Knowles coming in at defensive coordinator. They retained Andy Kotelnicki for at least 1 more year as their offensive coordinator. Look, you've got Drew Aller in his last year. You've got 2 great backs. You got everything you just mentioned. I think the key for me, those 3 guys you mentioned at wide receiver, they need finally this to be the year that they figured out at wide receiver. I like Khalil Dinkins at tight end. I like Luke Reynolds at tight end. I'm not expecting them to have the Tyler Warren season at tight end. If they do, then we've got a whole nother conversation. But Tyler Warren's not coming twice. They need these wide receivers on the outside to step up. The stat that sticks with you in that Notre Dame game, right? What's the stat, Max? Their wide receivers did not catch a single pass against Notre Dame. Not one. It was all Warren and Nick Singleton coming out of the backfield. It's going to be about moments. Look, I look right now at least 8, if not 9 games on Penn State's schedule. I go, they're just better. They're just going to win, right? Oregon game, Ohio State, at Ohio State. That's always a big mental block. They get Indiana at home. They get Nebraska at home. I think Nebraska is pretty good too. But this Penn State team, they should fully expect to win a national title this year. And there's not many teams in the country every year where you go national title or bust. Penn State's one of them. This is the year they got to the Final Four last year, and honestly, credit to them. I know everybody was disappointed with how it ended, but they were tied with all of 30 seconds left in the national semifinal, and I don't know that they would have gone to the national final and beaten Ohio State anyway. I wouldn't have picked them to beat Ohio State anyway, but I get that it was disappointing. They had a great season last year.
And they lost by 7 to Ohio State, and they were on the goal line with like 2 minutes left. They were right there with them.
They sure were. We were standing right there watching it happen, for sure. But I think it's going to come down to moments. When you look at the big moments for Penn State last year, and I know they won 2 playoff games, right? They beat SMU, they beat Boise, but they're better than those 2 teams, right? You look at all the big moments last year. Down on the goal line against Ohio State. Potential game-winning drive against Notre Dame, the Big Ten title game, and they were trying to come back, and they just couldn't. This team they're going to be judged by moments, not the whole season, right? And if there's any sort of upset along the way, then we have a bigger problem, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's just going to be in those moments, not just Drew Aller, because everyone's going to put it on Drew Aller, the entire team, the wide receivers, the coaching staff, everybody. Is it going to happen when it matters most? That's what it's going to come down to.
Under James Franklin, Penn State's done a terrific job of beating everyone they're supposed to. Like, you rarely ever see a massive upset like it happens in Notre Dame every year, right? Notre Dame seems to lose to a team like Stanford and Marshall and Northern Illinois last year. It's like, how on earth do you let that happen? Penn State doesn't do that. The problem with Penn State, though, under James Franklin has been, all right, the teams that are either better than you or basically as good as you, can you beat them? And he hasn't really done that too much at Penn State. This is the year now. Like, this is the year where, okay, this is the best roster, in my opinion, that James Franklin's ever had in now his 12 years as Penn State's head coach. This is the year to put it all together and to make a serious, serious run at a national title, which would be the first one in 40 years, basically, at that program. This is the year for Nittany Lions because, of course, everyone else is going to leave after this year and graduate, and you start a whole new era of Penn State football after this year. This is the year to put it all together for Penn State and try to make a run at not only a Big Ten title, but a national title in 2025. Dawn, I feel like this will also ruffle some feathers here at number 2 and number 1. We'll start off at number 2, and people can guess what number 1 is. Number 2 for me is Texas. I have Texas Longhorns right now as the number 2 team in the country. everyone would talk about Arch Manning, and deservingly so. We just spent the entire first segment on Arch Manning, right? So he's obviously the most hyped quarterback right now in college football. We'll talk about him in just a second. The strength of this team is the defense. Texas's defense is loaded next year. It was one of the best in the country last year. It's the biggest strength of the entire team, I would argue, last year. And once again, should be one of the best in the country this year, too. You have the best edge rusher, in my opinion, in College Simmons. You have the best linebacker room in college football with the best linebacker in college football in Anthony Hill Jr. And the best secondary in college football, too, with guys like Malik Muhammad and Michael Taft leading it, who are two of the best players in the country at cornerback and safety. So the defense is elite. The offense, you got Arch Manning now, who I think right now is the betting favorite to win the Heisman Trophy, could absolutely become the best quarterback in college football. Some question marks elsewhere, though, on that offense. One, can Arch Manning live up to the hype? Two, you lose some pass catchers from what was a really good receiving core last year. So still be a pretty good one, though, in 2025. And then three, the offensive line that I think was probably the best offensive line in America last year lost a lot of starters, including a top 10 pick in Kelvin Banks Jr., too. So great running back room. C.J. Baxter being back from injury is huge. Some questions, though, up front in that offensive line. And also, that receiving core lost a lot of talent, but they still be pretty good in 2025.
Young offensive line, young receiving core, young at quarterback. And young at quarterback is just a theme for a ton of these teams in college football right now, especially at the top with first-year starters, and that includes Arch Manning. But, I think you made a great point there, too. Obviously, the defense, but are we just not recognizing enough what this run game could still be with Trey Wisner and then a healthy C.J. Baxter? Yeah. Because that's really, look, Steve Sarkisian wants balance in this offense. He wants the RPO game to work, but he's going to want to run the football a lot. Plus, even though he's a Manning, we got a much better running. True. We got a much better running option at quarterback than we had previously with Quinn Ewers, right, with Arch Manning. Arch Manning can really run. He's a dynamic athlete, too. So when you look at the backfield trio that you could have in this run game first and foremost, and then complementing it with Manning's arm and his ability to read defenses, that part gets fun. But no question, I think especially early in the season, when you talk about playing the Ohio States and the Floridas of the world early in the year, this defense, this secondary, especially guys like Malik Muhammad and Michael Taft in that secondary, and even Anthony Hill at linebacker, the ability to cover, that was the best part about this team. Even last year, right? They had the highest coverage grade in the country. They were the one team that really that found a way to shut down Jeremiah Smith. They just couldn't get it done on offense last year against Ohio State. So, they're loaded. They're absolutely loaded on defense, and you're just waiting for Manning to really start to carry the load. But doesn't have a whole lot of time to wait because you got to go up to Columbus week 1 for a rematch right away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you look at that team right now, and you mentioned the receiving core. Ryan Wingo should have a big breakout year as a sophomore. And I also want to shout out Jack Endries, the California tight end transferring into Texas. In my opinion,
such a big move.
The second best tight end in the country. Also, his dad, Robert Endries, shout out him. Big fan of the show too.
Big fan of the show.
Big fan of the Endries family. Jack Endries is a star player. Former walk-on at California, now at Texas. Should absolutely replace the production left behind by Gunnar Helm, if not exceed that production left behind by Gunnar Helm too. But Texas, elite defense, what could be an elite quarterback in Arch Manning, maybe the best quarterback in the country very soon in Arch Manning. It's just some question marks offensive line-wise, and then a young receiving core too, is why they're not number one, Dalton. They have a great argument to number one. Why they're not, though, number one for me is the Clemson Tigers. I am all in on Clemson this year. I just look at that roster. They made the playoff last year. They won the ACC last year. They bring back, in my opinion, as of right now, the best quarterback in the country in Cade Klubnik. They have an elite receiving core coming back with TJ Moore back, Bryant Wesco back, and Antonio Williams all back. The top 3 receivers from last year. 2 of them are true freshmen, so they could get a lot better in year 2. Really good receiving core. Offensive line is still very solid with a lot of returning starters coming back too. And then that defense, man. The best D line in the country. Peter Woods, the best D tackle in the country. TJ Parker should be the edge 1 in the NFL draft this upcoming April too. Maybe 2 top 10 picks on the defensive line. A great linebacker unit too. An elite secondary behind it too with Avion Terrell leading it. This Clemson team, it just feels like all over, has no true weakness, maybe besides running back right now. But in my opinion, the best offense in the country, the 3rd best defense in the country. Right now, Clemson for me, very close. It's not a far runaway number 1, but right now is my number one team in the country.
They bring back so much from what was such a young team last year. I say it over and over. They were not supposed to win the ACC last year. Cade Klubnik was a sophomore. Their secondary was filled with sophomores and freshmen. Peter Woods and TJ Parker as true sophomores. I mean, you had a team that came together so well last year, and the improvement that you got from Klubnik, arguably the most improved quarterback in the country, that's really the biggest thing that makes you feel like, okay, this team is here. This is their time now. Clemson is back as a national title contender. And look, shout out to you for having them number one, because you've called out the last two national champions, right, in Michigan and Ohio State. I don't know yet if you're picking Clemson to win it all, but I have a feeling when they're sitting here at number one in your top 25, that might stick through the whole way. But you look at a team that I think more than any other conference in college football, this is clearly the favorite to win the ACC. Even if they were to slip up out of conference against an LSU and or a South Carolina, you just feel like, okay, it's Clemson, and then it's everybody else. At least that's what. And now there's good teams. There's Miami, there's Louisville, there's SMU, there's some at Duke and Georgia Tech, but Clemson, they're so loaded. And that defense, I mean, is it the most easily projectable top 5 defense in the country this year? It's just silly how much talent, first-round talent they have on this defense at all 3 levels. So I think, look, huge game, week 1 at home against LSU, obviously. That's a huge one, especially when you talk about if they ever needed an at-large bid, right, which last year they didn't. They may not this year either, but you just have to like how this sets up for Clemson and how much talent that they have. I think the clearest favorite to win their conference of any team in the country.
How about week 1, man? According to my rankings, we got number 1 Clemson versus number 9 LSU. We got number 2 Texas against number 5 Ohio State. Number 6 Notre Dame against number 11 Miami. We're going to find out quick about a lot of these teams.
3 top 11 matchups. And then you've got some other teams with some really intriguing games, right? You've got, where is it? Auburn at 25 is playing Baylor. Utah has to go to UCLA and Nico Iamaleava's first game. K-State, Iowa State in week 0. I mean, week 1, the first couple weeks of the season, I don't know if this was the case in prior years or not, but it feels like the first 2-3 weeks of the season, we've got some mega out-of-conference games. Michigan's playing Oklahoma in week 2. They have to go out on the road and play Oklahoma. We've got some fantastic games early in the season out of conference that you still wonder, are teams going to go the route of easy out of conference schedules to get at-large bids, or are they going to start scheduling games like this more often? I think we're still in the early phase of that kind of experimentation of what to do with your out of conference schedule.
And I get it. Some people like Ryan Nelson in the chat pointing out, like, listen, they lost 4 games last year. How can they be number 1? I get it. But again, you're kind of projecting to next year. Clemson was a playoff team last year. They won the ACC last year. They bring back literally everyone. Right? Texas, at least, there's some question marks on offensive line. And obviously, is Arch Manning going to live up to the hype? Like, I have more faith that Cade Klubnik will be an elite quarterback than Arch Manning. Arch Manning can be better than Cade Klubnik. I'm not denying that. But I know what I'm getting in Cade Klubnik right now. Arch Manning is still a mystery a little bit.
And those 4, let's put something on those 4 games they lost. One of them was week 1 against Georgia.
Yeah.
We were not picking them to beat Georgia week 1. One of them was the playoff game at Texas. We were not picking them to
And they put up a fight against Texas, too.
And they absolutely did. Klubnik had, was it 5 big-time throws in that game? I mean, okay. They lost to South Carolina by 3 points when South Carolina was raging hot. And the Louisville game's the one that concerned me, because Louisville went into Clemson and they physically dominated them. That's going to be a fun rematch on a Friday night at Louisville. But those other 3 games, I don't see a whole lot of shame in those, especially the Georgia and the Texas games. Georgia and Texas were better than them last year. South Carolina, pretty even last year with the way they were playing down the stretch, right? So I think, they lost 4 games, but I don't think it's fair to say that without some level of context. The Louisville one's the only one that really concerns me out of the 4.
What would you, before we move on, just to honorable mentions real quick, what would you change? Anything you would change that stands out to you in this top 25 overall?
Not necessarily. The top 3 in some order are the top 3. The next 5.
Who would you put in 1 if you just do it right now?
Oh, God, you're killing me. I think any of them are reasonable. I really do. I
Don't fence it on me. Come on, give me a team. Who would be number 1 for you?
Put it this way. If I was going like this, and the team that I think was most likely to finish the year number 1, if I want to go that route, then I'm with you on Clemson.
Okay.
That's the way that I would go about
Finish,
it.
like, in terms of winning it all?
At least at the end of conference title week, being the number one seed going into the playoff matchups and stuff.
Okay.
Always play. I haven't picked my national title winner yet, but if you were telling me at the end of the second week of January going into the playoff selection, if Clemson's the number one team, that's probably the one that would least surprise me.
So you would put Clemson number one?
I think I'm in agreement here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then 2 and 3 and all that.
I might flip Penn State and Texas, maybe. Just because Penn
State's a lot like Clemson.
The youth for all of these, for the youth at especially quarterback for number 2, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, hell, number 8. I mean, look at all those teams that you're looking at with roughly first-year starters.
Yeah.
That's a big question, whereas I don't question that with Clemson and Penn State.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm making a call. I understand Ryan Nelson's not very happy about Clemson at number 1. But, hey, that's what I've got the last 2 national title winners right. Not saying I'm going to pick Clemson to win it all. We'll find that out in a couple weeks.
That's why they play the games.
I'm just calling right now. I'm going for the hat trick this year. National title winners preseason. So we'll see. Right, before we move on, some honorable mentions, because I think there's some schools that people are like, where are they? Oklahoma, I think, will be the biggest one for some people because they hopefully improved that offense from last year. And obviously that defense will still be really good. Missouri, I know you wanted to point them out too. Another one. I know some other Boise State, some people had, I think, in the Coaches Poll, they're in the ranked top 25.
They were number 25.
Yeah. SMU. No, we had SMU in there. Who am I think of? I got to look at the Coaches Poll real quick. But anyone else you want to shout out that was not in the top 25 that you think could be somewhere in there?
2 that probably stick out to me is probably Missouri. I still think they have a lot of talent. And did they win 10 games last year? They went 10-3,
Yeah.
I think it was. I mean, Missouri's still a talented team figuring out their quarterback situation. And I think the other one that, if they're not going to be ranked preseason, then they'll be ranked if they win in week 0, actually. And that's a team in Iowa State that, look, They were one of the teams that tied at the top, and they were second in the Big 12 last year, losing to Arizona State in the Big 12 title game. But we're questioning their wide receiver situation a little bit. They got a good defense. They have Rocco Beck back. I think Iowa State, if they win week 0 against Kansas State, they'll pretty much jump right into that spot.
Iowa State, number 21 in the Coaches Poll. So they were the highest-ranked team that did not make my top 25. And then BYU at 23, did not have them in the top 25. I have a lot of questions on quarterback right now at BYU. So I'm a little worried about that, even though they have a very talented team around, but quarterback is a big question mark right now. And then Boise State is another one that I didn't have in my top 25 either. Then Oklahoma, Missouri, USC, Baylor, we had Auburn, Iowa.
TCU is another interesting one to me.
In terms of other Group of 5 schools, I really like Memphis this year. I think Memphis is going to have with Brendan Lewis now at quarterback, who I think is the best Group of 5 quarterback we have. They're absolutely a team to watch. Georgia Tech, obviously, too. Nebraska could have a huge year this year. I think Nebraska's really set up well to have a big year. So those are some other schools that I would shout out in the honorable mention side of it. Also, Impact Poker helped me out my Clemson argument. Tom Allen at DC now. That is an improvement, I think, coming in from Penn State.
Yeah.
That's a big get for Clemson, too. So that is big time for Clemson. But all right, that wraps up our preseason top 25. I want to thank you guys for watching this, obviously, with the AP poll, I think, coming out this Monday. So we wanted to beat that before that came out. But, yeah, let us know in the comments below. What do you think? Obviously, a lot of hot takes I think I had here in the top 25 as kind of some call-outs of what I think will happen this year, who's going to break out and become a great team next year, who might not be that good as other people think they're going to be this year, too. So let me know in the comments below, because obviously you guys probably disagree with this list a lot. Let me know below. On Monday, we have actually a couple episodes next week that are going to be very, very fun. On Monday, Dalton, we're going to do a couple drafts, not a mock draft. We're going to do, one, a Heisman draft. So you, me, and producer Eli will be drafting 5 players, probably even more than 5 players. We'll talk about it later. But players that we think will win the Heisman next year. We'll get a scoring system for that too, like we did last year too. And the other draft we're going to do, guaranteed first-round pick draft. Which players are guaranteed to be first-round picks in 2026? Meaning you get 1 point for every correct answer and either -2 or -3 points for every wrong answer. So you don't want to get anyone wrong in that draft. Just who do we think are absolute locks to be first-round picks in next April's NFL draft? That'll be on Monday's episode, both those drafts, the Heisman draft and the guaranteed first-round pick draft. But for Dalton Wassman, for our producers back there, Tyler and Eli, I'm Max Chadwick. We'll see you guys on Monday with our guaranteed first-round pick draft and our Heisman draft.